Hello, it's Jack Shooter here of Attention Magazine. Welcome to Crucial Listening, the podcast where I speak to musicians and sound artists about 3 albums that are important to them. My guest this time is Daniel Menche, an abstract sound musician from Portland, Oregon. Daniel's music is something that stretches over your head, covers every single iota of your reality. He takes a particular concept and then stretches it over time and space in a way that seems to just unravel in all directions into the infinite. He released a record called The Soaring on Siege late last year, which features most prominently the beautiful voices of Faith Kalocha and Joe Preston weaving in and out of each other like smoke trails, processed heavily so that they're stretched and smeared. It's amazing. It's over an hour long, and to be stranded halfway down it is to feel like you've always existed inside The Soaring. That's what I love most about Daniel's work. And appropriately, this conversation with Daniel was sprawling as well. We go really deep on these records and his personal experiences with them. There are some wonderful stories inside each one of these 3 records, and listening back to the albums themselves after speaking to Daniel, I can still feel his enthusiasm and his intensity of connection ringing through my own experience. There's also a great anecdote about his time recording vocals on Sun's album Monoliths and Dimensions as connected to The Soaring. Please do go over to Daniel's Bandcamp, danielmenche.bandcamp.com, and go to Siege Records as well, siegerecords.bandcamp.com, to find Daniel's record, The Soaring. And go over to attentionmagazine.co.uk/crucial listening for more links to Daniel's music and information on his picks as well. Hope you are all doing well as we edge tentatively into 2021. Sending my best as always. Thank you so much for listening. Please do rate the podcast 5 stars preferably, but be honest if you like. I admire your candor. This is Daniel Menche on Crucial Listening. Hello, Daniel. Welcome to Crucial Listening.
Hey, thank you for having me on. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on the show. So you've brought 3 important albums for us to talk about. Before we get stuck into those, I want to ask about a recent record of your own titled The Soaring, which came out on Siege just recently. And from what I've read, it sounds like the roots for this one go back quite far, the original conception of it. So I wondered if you could start by telling me a bit about that.
I believe it might have been 2007. Yeah, it was 2007 is when I had an idea to do a vocal-only recording, but never in mind of my own voice. I honestly don't feel comfortable with my own singing voice, and I've proved that many times. Now, when I perform live, a lot of people see that I do this throat stick microphone on my throat, which kind of records my larynx, and I put it through a bunch of amps and everything. That's one thing, but I really wanted to try to get a vocal recording that was very pure voice. And the one person that immediately came to mind was a very close and dear friend of mine, Joe Preston. And his voice is so rich and amazing. He's known for his project, The Thrones, which is amazing and incredible. But he's also like this master bass player that's been in several bands. first Earth album. He's pretty much all over that. And then there's a Melvin's album that he's on. I think I'm not knowledgeable on Melvin so much, but I think it's Honky. Anyway, he was in several bands. Sun, High on Fire. He's a real heavy hitter. But his project Thrones is actually the throne of awesomeness. It's Joe Preston is really incredible force of nature. And one thing about his voice is, mainly when you hear his recordings, it's kind of like this very intense growl, or kind of like a in between of a growl and a very bass heavy voice. So I wanted to try to record him as clean as possible, and he was really kind of shy about the whole thing. I said, well, Joe, just pretend you're in the shower. It's like you're just singing in the shower. And I really was very forceful on trying to get him to just sing. He was in a really, he kind of admitted that he was in a kind of a, not feeling that great and emotionally and everything. I said, well, that's okay, but let's try to make something kind of awesome out of this. And so I went to his house, and I had a puppy, and it's my little dog that I have now, Arrow. He's a Chihuahua, but at the time he was a puppy. He was tiny. So I had this tiny dog that literally could fit in my hand. Like he was that tiny. Wow. I said, hey, Joe, here, hold my puppy. Just hold him. And I'm going to put a microphone in front of you, and I just want you to close your eyes. I just want you to sing the way that you just sing, like so you're in a shower. And the funny thing is I caught him in the morning, and he was just wearing his underwear. Okay, so here he is sitting in this chair in his underwear with this cute little puppy, and he's singing so beautifully. His voice was an angel. It was so beautiful, so amazing. And he kept on going. I was like, and I kind of got to a point where he was just exhausted. I go, great, Joe, beautiful, amazing. And I took these recordings, and I made a big, huge, long drone piece called Siberic Doxology. And that title was sort of a collaboration title between him and I. And because I was like, well, I was like, this is very doxology. That'd be great. But then it's like, well, why don't we make it more abstract? And considering also it's Siberic is sort of has a reference to, the three-headed dog that guards the gates of Hades. Right. And we thought that was really funny because we have this little puppy. So we did a collaboration album where it was him and me, and it was just pure voice. And it came out on a single-sided LP from a small local label here in Portland, Discourage Records. It's really cool because it's one-sided, and the other side of the record is locked grooves of Joe's voice, which is really cool. And if you can find it, it's pretty cool because it's like 23 or so locked grooves of his voice just going, this beautiful growl. And it also came out on CD and DVD. We made a funny video where we went to a fake Stonehenge and walked around with this little puppy. And it's this CD DVD is really easy to find in used sections of your record store. I'm constantly finding it used. It's the reason why is the label who released on CD decided to release it as a CD DVD on one disc, and you have to play one side as a CD and the other side as a DVD, and no one could figure that out.
Oh no.
And so I couldn't even figure it out. And so it was like this big problem where no one could play this damn thing, But, the vinyl is completely amazing and awesome. And if you get your hands on the vinyl, it's really beautiful. So that was a really fun recording to do with a very dear and close friend. And I just always want to try rely on collaborations. If I collaborate with anyone, it has to be a collaboration of friendship, not necessarily a collaboration of sound or music. And it is a collaboration of sound and music, but really this is just about friendship. And that's how I've always regarded collaborating with other artists. It's like, the music is actually kind of a side.
Right.
It's off to the side. It's really about creating, a friendship. And so recently I've been just trying to I'm always trying to challenge myself of coming up with something different, a different angle or approach with my music. A lot of times it's not usually that different. It's not like, I wish I could do something really radically different to, shock myself, but it's always sort of like, well, it's in the same book, but not the same page.
Right.
Type. And I had an idea originally. How should I say this? Whenever I get an idea, it's ridiculously too big, and then it's about the process of scaling it down.
Right.
And so I had this idea of doing a big, like music for a choir, like a really big choir. And, a lot of it was a little bit inspired by the Sacred Harp shape note singing, which still exists. And that's like a American folk situation where people will sit in a square and the falsetto side will sit on one side and the bass side will sit on another, and they'll kind of sing according to these shapes, these musical notation shapes. It's a very old American folk Christian tradition. And I found that rather interesting because it was a process where people would read music of shapes and they would sing it, because a lot of people back then were, they were illiterate. They couldn't read, music notation or words, but they could see shapes and they can sing it. So that was kind of appealing to me. So I was thinking of like, wow, it'd be really great if I could, come up with something for a choir, but it is so out of my reach
Right.
on how to do that. And then, I started thinking like, well, it wouldn't be great if I could hire classically trained singers and try to figure out how to give them notation. And then I just couldn't even get myself to come up with that. I had a learning experience of my failure to work with singing, my own singing especially. And it happened actually kind of around the same time as I recorded Joe Preston, is right after I recorded him and did that recording. It's a little bit hard for me to remember the times and dates, but we got, both Joe Preston and myself got asked by Stephen O'Malley to come up to Seattle to do vocals for the Sun album, Monoliths and Dimensions. And it was a very cryptic email, like, oh, okay, well, sure, why not? Let's do it.
Yeah.
And it was this, it was really interesting because it was immediately like, well, of course, that sounds great.
Right. Yeah.
We have no idea what you want to do, but sure. And Stephen was, in Seattle because his family lives there. So, but then also there's a fantastic studio there that Randall Dunn was running, and they were able to kind of get a lot of stuff for this gigantic album, the Monoliths of Dimensions, a lot of the recordings there, but also in other places, and then piece it all together for one big final record. So anyway, Joe and I hop in the car and we drive up to Seattle. It's like a 3-hour drive, and we're both just wondering, like, what is this? What will this be? What's going, but we're just doing it. And myself, I was thinking, like, I'm not really a singer. I don't really sing, but I think, people kind of see that I do that with my live performances, with my throat, my larynx singing. So I was like, well, should I bring my throat microphone, or is this,
Right.
So we arrive, and the instruction was that there was going to be this piecing together a male choir for this one particular track, because they had another track that was all women choir, a female choir. So there was going to be two tracks that was very, women-based, male-based for singing. And so here we are, a few of us actually, in this really tiny studio. And Attila, who was the vocalist at the time, he was not there, but they had the recording of him, and we were supposed to be doing this big, huge, thing. Uh-huh. Now, keep in mind, I had Arrow with me, which was like a little puppy, and that everyone's kind of holding while they're doing these. Well, the thing that was very interesting was we're doing these recordings of all of us going, the song that you hear on that album is Hunting and Gathering. That's the track. So that was what we were recording. Over and over again, the engineer kept on stopping and going, hey, someone's out of tune. We have to do that over again. And everyone's kind of like looking at each other. Like, okay, let's do it again. And I was like, over and over again. And then finally there was like a pause, like, yeah, it's Daniel. Hey, Daniel. And I was like, what do you mean? I don't understand what's this tune thing. And then they come in with one of those little old Casio keyboards, like from the 80s. And they hit like a tone. And it's like, here, try to match this. And I was like, and I go, and everyone in the whole room is just kind of going, yeah.
Oh no.
So then my heart sank, because I was like, I really suck at this. And apparently there's a whole, art form to choir singing, even if it's right. For like. And finally, it was like, yeah, Daniel, could you just kind of sit out on this one? And I felt like, I don't know, just someone, a little child in the playground that, can't play in the game anymore, And,
yeah.
And I felt so embarrassed. I was absolutely just like, oh my God, I didn't. And it was the first time ever I realized that I'm absolutely not a musician. Like, I'm just not a musician. I'm something else. I guess I'm a painter or a sculptor with sound, but I'm just not a musician. I really don't know anything about music. So anyway, the recording just sounds amazing and incredible in the studio while we were there. And we're kind of excited, and we're all left for the evening to drive back to Portland. But the whole time I just felt really terrible. Yeah, but I didn't tell anyone, and no one really talked to me. It was just sort of this thing. And so about 8 months later, Son comes to Portland to perform, and I go see it, and I see Steven. I say, hey, Steven, how's it going, man? Go, oh, yeah, great to see you, blah, blah, blah. And sheepishly, I ask, hey, how's that recording going? And he pauses, and he looks at me, and he goes, dude! Your vocals are so sick on it. I go, wait, what do you mean? He goes, oh man, we're doing the final mixing, and we noticed that everyone sounded too clean and too like a perfect choir, but then your vocals sound like a dead zombie. And we're like, wait, that's the perfect ingredient. It's like this dead zombie just in the mix. And I was like, oh, so you liked my vocals? Oh, just sounds like death. It's great. It's just a perfect mix. And I felt like, again, like a school child that, was really embarrassed. And now I'm like, oh, I did a great job, actually. I thank you. And then if you hear the recording, it sounds so massive and gigantic, all the voices, but you do hear this god-awful, and that's me.
Wow. Oh.
So the deal was, from that learning lesson, that was like 2007, I believe, or something like that, was, okay, don't try to be a musician. Just don't even try. Don't even try to sing. Just don't. Just. But the voice is the most harmonically rich instrument in existence, is the voice. And it's something that I'm very obsessed with the voice. Whenever I hear bands and music, it's kind of like it's the vocal element that really gets me. It really sells me on a recording. The human voice is something so beautiful and rich and incredible. I hold it up very high. I certainly did not hold my voice up very high. So again, back to present day, like this year, I really passionately wanted to do a vocal only recording, but absolutely positively not my voice, that's for sure. And I really want something that was very rich with a baritone and falsetto balance, And this whole time I was trying to think of hiring classical singers, hiring a choir, hiring this, like, can I get an art grant to get just a big, a big thing? And over again, I was like, what am I thinking? Why don't you just use your friends? Because that's what it's all about. It's all about friendship. It's all about friends. And if you really want to get the best performance from someone else, it has to be a really good friend. It has to be a really beautiful friend. The closer the friend, the better, a stronger art can be created. So I had to kind of slap myself and say, Daniel, work with friends and you're going to get the best recording. So Fave Calocia of Mammifer has absolutely the most angelic voice. Her voice is really, truly beautiful beyond compare, beyond measure, beyond words. Her voice is absolutely stunning. And I did a collaboration with Mammifer that was a lot of fun to do, and worked. I've always been so intimidated by her voice, the beauty of her voice, that I never really thought of working with it because I didn't want to. How should I say? I didn't want to like destroy the sound quality of her voice.
Right.
But then it just hit me like, oh my goodness, this would be perfect. Record her singing as clean as possible and record Joe Preston as clean as possible and do it in a way that's a total friendship gathering. And so I got in touch with them and we were like, okay, let's do it. And I drove up to the island that Faith lives at, Vashon, and Joe met me there. And I didn't exactly have a plan, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but I just kind of said, like, the only reference that you have is I'm going to play sine waves of tones, of one high tone, one low tone, and you're just going to listen to these tones and try to match them. So here I am with an iPad, with an app with sine waves, where I'm kind of moving sine waves around, and they're listening to the sine waves, and they're singing according to the sine waves, which is a rather fun thing to do. It was fun for them. It was fun in the idea of trying to chase a sine wave with your voice.
Right.
And I'm sure other people do this all the time. But of course, this went on for about like an hour and a half, where these sine waves are going into their headphones and they're constantly chasing the frequencies with their own voice and the sine waves. But my goodness, it was so beautiful, recording them, and so, it was kind of taking what I did over 10 years ago 10 years ago, longer than that, with Joe, and just having a very abstract idea and strategy, just a very abstract strategy, which I guess maybe that's an oxymoron to say that. Abstract strategy. Might be a title of my next album. And just kind of do some faith work. When I say faith, not faith the person, but faith as in, I got a lot of faith in this friendship, and I have a lot of faith in the music that can come out of this friendship, and I'm going to lay down my faith, and I think this is going to work, and it really did work. Their voices are so incredibly beautiful. And when I was mixing it, I kind of felt like, they needed a third element. And the third element was like even lower bass. I needed a much more richer bass. And obviously, I'm not going to be singing on this one. So, and we can rule that out. But Joe Preston had not one but two double bass cellos at his house, and he lives about an hour and a half away from me, and he has two double basses, which is really amazing. So I went up there and recorded these gigantic double basses that were just huge. I mean, they're like taller than me, and I don't know how to play these instruments at all. I don't know how to play any instrument, but I just recorded myself playing these instruments the way that I feel like playing them, which is basically playing them as slow as possible and finding the sounds that I really like. And so I recorded these bass cellos at Joe Preston's house. And again, this was another act of friendship where it's like, hey, can I just come over to your house and, play these bass cellos even though I don't know how to play them, and I'll try not to scare your cats, and can you hold arrow my doggy while I bow it, that type of thing. And so I got some really fantastic rich sounds from these double bass cellos, and I said, what, this is perfect, this is going to be great, this is going to be this really pure and simple recording that involves, some of my best friends, closest, dearest friends. And, maybe no one will listen to it. Maybe no one will buy it. Maybe no one will care. But you know what? This is a document of friendship, and that's all it's about, So that's the story with the Soaring. And originally, I made a mix that was way too long. And I sent it to Faith. And she was head over heels. She loved it. And I said, well, it's too long. I can cut it down. We can cut it down so that, it'll make for an LP or whatever. And she's like, no. It has to be the whole thing. It has to be the whole thing. And so I was like, are you sure? Because, that type of thing. And she was really adamant that it has to be 1 hour long. And it's like, okay, hey, if you say it, you we're doing it, Mm-hmm. And there's talks like they actually want to release it as LP, which would be 2 LPs, and
wow.
I kind of telling them like, I think that might be, I don't know, that's really a great idea, but it's just the idea of flipping over records and such, but it's fine.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't, I don't know, but it's on CD and digital, and it's just, again, if I collaborate with someone, it's out of friendship, it's a document of friendship. It's not of course it's a music document, but really for me personally, and also the people involved, it's a document of friendship. And so that's what the Soaring is really about. So, yeah.
Amazing. Daniel, that was such an incredible story. I mean, I've heard the Soaring a couple of times through now. I think being able to go back and listen in light of that context is going to be super rewarding. So thank you. Now we should go on to talk about your important records. One question I like to ask to begin with, and we touched on it before we started the podcast proper, is how you thought about the term important when coming up with this list. So was there a way that you thought about that word in order to produce this list of 3 records?
Yeah, it was. I had to take a few steps back because how should I say this? A lot of times I could get a little bit turned off by the self-righteousness of nostalgia. And I'm finding that so many people will talk with a clenched fist about what was real and what was awesome, what was great when they were in their formative years, what was great when they were a teenager and such, and this and that. And I kind of felt I get so exhausted by people with so much pride in what records was the real deal for them. But yet they kind of want to say, well, it's the real deal for the rest of the world too. And I'm like,
Yeah.
And so, but it's a very good challenge, a very good question. And immediately a lot of times I just don't, I just feel that nostalgia can be very toxic is how one can really convey it. But then thinking about it, about some of these records, it's like what makes them important is first and foremost how they completely knocked my brain out so that I don't think. There's no thinking, it's about feeling. How it really changed my perception of the world, let alone music, let alone sound, let alone art, but just pure perception of life as a young child and teenager. And how even these records that we're going to be talking about, they absolutely do not sound like my music in a sense. But they completely, they are completely the cornerstones of who I am. So, it's, in one sense of the word, I was a little bit hesitant on, the formative years of what music affects you. But then there's the other side of me like, well, I can't deny it. I can't deny that there's things that really completely changed about it. And as a matter of fact, I owe a lot of my existence to some of these records, if you really want to get down to it. And then more I kind of thought about like how incredibly important and crucial, some these records can be in growing up. It could be either a guiding light or a beautiful pillow of comfort that you rest your head on. These are kind of the records that fit that. And so, they're important to me. But at the same time, though, I really despise the pride that a lot of people have. Like, oh, well, back in my day, music was real, and I'm like, well, actually it wasn't, but whatever, No. So, these are very, very deep personal cuts. And I think I really do appreciate your podcast or your interviews, because I'm like, this is really great that the artist that you're interviewing does touch upon how these records kind of get in the bloodstream of the artist and makes them who they are. It's as opposed to a overall cultural, importance. This is more like a personal importance, not a cultural importance. So
absolutely, yeah. There'll be no point doing more than one episode of this podcast if it was about categorically important records. I think that's why I enjoyed doing it.
It's like I was at the library way back, and there was this gigantic, thick photo book of nothing but photographs of the Black Flag logo tattoo. It was all just hundreds of photos of Black Flag tattoos, and then just this deep analysis of interviewing people of like why they got, why it's so important that they have a Black Flag logo tattoo and everything. I was like, my God, this is pathetic. And so, it's just something kind of funny about that, where it's like, well, nothing wrong with having a black flag tattoo, but the idea that, hey, let's buy this gigantic photo book of hundreds of black flag tattoos.
Right.
And read about why black flag is so important. I like black flag too, but I'm not going to get a tattoo. But
yeah.
But what I'm saying is there's this thing of, I think it's more common in the punk metal world of, hey, this is real and you're not,
Right.
It's like, well,
yeah.
I tell you what's real is how these records affected me. So
yes.
let's talk. I should probably shut up and start talking about these records, right?
Nodding at everything you're saying. Let's get stuck into your first album. So, yeah, if you give me the name of it and then a little bit about why this one is important to you as well.
Okay, so the first album I want to talk about is Alvin Lucier's Music for a Long Thin Wire. And the story about this particular recording was it came out in 1980 as a double LP, but recorded a few years earlier, I believe. Now, in 1980, I was 10 years old. And when I was a child, I was just your typical kid who hid out in his bedroom and just listened to the radio. And I had a tiny little clock radio. Like, just that was the only music thing I had, was a little clock radio that had a really tiny little speaker on it. And, there was only 2 radio stations that I would listen to, and one of them was just the classic rock station. Again, this was like, 1980 or so. It might have been like 81, 82. It's hard for me to grab it, but clearly it wasn't before 1980 because as I look, that album came out in 1980. But there's one radio station here in Portland, KBOO, and they would play, different stuff, alternative stuff, things that just wasn't, classic rock, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being a little child late at night and right next to my bed with my little clock radio with a tiny little speaker. This is the same speaker that is also the alarm. So, when you wake up in the morning, it's like, bah, 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 bah. And this is the same speaker that plays music, but, again, lo-fi of lo-fi of lo-fi. But that was my world, and just like you see the old image of the dog staring at the gramophone speaker, being really curious, like that old,
Right.
Okay, well, that's, imagine me, but in this tiny little clock radio, listening to anything I can get my hands on, anything I could just hear out in the world. And so I'm listening to it, and there was this drone coming out, but you hear a few record pops, right? And so it's like, oh, they're playing something on the radio, and I know it's a vinyl record, but it's just this drone that's going on forever. And again, this is like 1981. I'm 11 years old, and this was such a what is this type of moment. And such a I'm locked and frozen, staring at my clock radio, what's coming out of it. And it just kept on going forever. And I was like, what is this? And how can they play this on the radio? Because those days the radio was the only thing that existed. And as far as like music, you just turn on the radio if you want to listen to music.
Right.
Unless you want to go buy your music. And if you buy your music, then you play your music the way you want to play it. But really, the radio was it. And I was absolutely, as a child, stunned that there's this drone that was moving a little bit, but not much. And then the DJ came on and goes, oh, well, that was Alvin Lucier's Music for a Long Thin Wire. And he basically read the back of the LP. He says, well, that was recorded using a single wire stretched all the way across a shopping mall, the longest shopping mall in America. And it would played by itself, meaning Alvin Lucier did not touch the wire or anything. It just kind of let the wire just play on its own. And the length of this wire was just, I don't know exactly the length of it, but it's extremely long, like extremely long. And I was absolutely jaw dropped when he described that's what I was listening to. The idea that, and not only a whole record was made with just one string stretched as far as possible and not even being played, absolutely blew me away. Now, here's the other angle, the shopping mall angle. So you have to understand that here in America, shopping malls are the cathedrals that we have. Okay, so Europe has cathedrals that represent this great god of Catholicism and such. But here in America, we have shopping malls, which is the god of capitalism. You know, these gigantic worshiping centers of buy sell capitalism. And shopping malls was a really big deal in America in the 70s and 80s. And as a child, my parents just would take me to the shopping mall every week, and it was exciting, kind of like going to a gigantic cathedral for Sunday Mass. It's like, now we're going to go to the shopping mall. And you just walk around, and you're like, it's a shopping mall. This is great. This is fantastic, because you're a kid and you don't know what is going on. So shopping malls were really something that myself, as a little child, spent a lot of time in, would get lost in, and then parents would panic but shopping malls was just a very strange American phenomenon. Now, digression. The most horrifying movie I've ever seen in my life as a child that ruined me, could not sleep for over a week, was George Romero's Dawn of the Dead. Now, Dawn of the Dead takes place in a shopping mall. I saw that, again, I might have been like maybe 8 or 9 years old when I saw it. It ruined my life. Now, a zombie movie is a zombie movie, but the idea that a zombie movie took place in a shopping mall,
right,
absolutely, completely ruined me. Okay. So I'm just trying to paint a picture of how important shopping malls were to, a dumb kid like myself. And so then to hear this recording coming out of my little clock radio of a long wire stretched through a shopping mall, I just thought it was like the most religious music I've ever heard. Like, it was it was so amazing, incredible. But again, these are my young ears listening to it through a little speaker. And it really changed how I thought about sound. The longevity of it, the minimalism of it, just was shocking to me, because I just thought everything had to be 3 minutes long. It had to have a beat, had to have a chorus, and embarrassingly or not, some pride, some shame, I was like a big Yes fan, the band Yes, when I was a little kid. So when I was a little kid, I just thought that was the most craziest music was Yes. Okay, that's how, and I was like, oh wow, they have an album, Tales from Topographical Oceans, and the songs are like 15 minutes long. You're like, that's radical. But when I heard Alvin Lucier's music for Long Thin Wire, I just was like, there's no way I can ever not forget about this. And for me, I kind of felt like, as a child, I was like, it communicated that there was a license to make music like this. I don't know if the right word, license, is a really good word, but like permission, like, hey, you know what? You can make any music that you want, any length, as simple, as complex. As a child, that meant everything to me. And so here's the kicker, is I never owned that recording. I never heard that recording since I was a child. It was one of those things like, well, I'll get around to buying that record one of these days, but just that initial experience of hearing that recording as a child late at night, when mom and dad are asleep and I'm just all alone with my dreams and strange, existence of being a young boy, and that recording coming through my clock radio, that was such a sacred moment that I kind of was like, I don't know if I really want to own that whole record and experience it again. Well,
Right.
2019, I'm in Los Angeles, and I had to do a concert. I was performing with Peter Ryberg, and I had a few days all alone. I was really all alone. I was like, this is strange. I don't know anyone in Los Angeles. And, I rented a car. I got a little Airbnb. What am I going to do? It's a Tuesday night. I'm kind of bored. Okay. Well, I guess I'm going to go to Amoeba Records, largest record store in the world. It's in Hollywood. And it's late at night. So go there. Place is almost empty. It was a really sad kind of record store. I mean, they're shut down now, right? But I was like, oh boy, Amoeba is it's kind of like, it's kind of a bummer. So I went to the experimental section. It was tiny. It was really tiny. It used to be gigantic. And I go, wow, not much for experimental music here anymore, huh? And I was like, sheesh, this is really a bummer. But then I noticed, Alvin Lucier section. That's cool. Wow, look at all these CDs that no one has bought. And I just was like, I'm just going to grab all of them and buy them. And one of them was a CD copy of Music for a Long Thin Wire. I was like, God damn it, I'm just going to buy this. Sheesh, golly, finally, let's buy this. Listen to it, Daniel. And so I buy a big, huge stack of Alvin Lucier CDs, and I go back to my incredibly tiny, yucky, gross Airbnb that I was staying at in the middle of Los Angeles, all alone. And it's really late at night, and I'm in bed, and I look at my my phone, Twitter, and Orna Bonchi tweets that are like, oh, such a fantastic evening here in Los Angeles celebrating Alvin Lucier's 85th birthday.
What?
The concert tonight with Alvin Lucier was fantastic and amazing and something for the books. And thank you everyone for coming out tonight. And my heart just sank.
Oh my
It just
God.
sank. And I was like, wait, Alvin Lucier performed tonight. I did not know about this. It was his birthday, 85 years old, and they performed many performances, all types. A lot of my friends were there. Everything, I had no idea.
Nice.
I was so destroyed. Yet the irony, the comedy, that same moment that I was buying all these Alvin Lucier CDs that he was performing, like, I don't know how many miles away, but not many, in the same town. I had no idea. And just a sheer coincidence that I also had bought Music for a Long Thin Wire. Now, I get home, and of course I play the recording, and it's like, yes, it's a very lovely recording. It's really cool, but it didn't have that childhood, impact, of course, because of that moment, the time and place. I mean, it's a fantastic, brilliant recording. And if you get around to it, there's a fantastic book of interviews with Alvin Lucier that you can buy, and there's a whole chapter about his story of recording Music for a Long Thin Wire, his story of obtaining a military-grade magnet to use to resonate the string, and the problems of traveling with this magnet in an airport. It's a great story. Anyway, I can't remember exactly what's the title of the book, but it's pretty easy to find. But amazing recording, totally changed my world in my sense. And again, this is something as being a young child and having something like that drop from heaven, meaning the airwaves, and just coming into my being as I'm in bed trying to get some sleep, but I can't because I'm enthralled by this beautiful drone. And again, I was like 11 years old, maybe 12, I don't know. And I just owe everything to that experience, that one evening of that scratchy record being played on the radio through my little radio.
Fantastic. I mean,
so that's my story of that album.
Yeah, amazing. And also, to be very cheesy, the fact that you've got this record as the binding factor between an experience you had when you're 11 and one you had when you're 48, 49, 50 is very nice as well, very satisfying.
And bless Orna Banshi's heart for re-releasing and releasing all these Alvin Lucier recordings. They're amazing. They're great. They're so fantastic. And, Stephen O'Malley and Oren have performed their guitar drones on with Alvin Lucier too and collaborating with them. And it's like real. I think it's just so cool, so great. I really recommend getting just about anything by Alvin Lucier for that matters. He is an absolute milestone of, new music, any music, all music. I think he's a really big giant. And also he is a person that I don't know him. I've never met him, but you when you listen to him talk, see him, you're like, this guy is like cool. Right. This is a cool guy.
Yeah.
This guy's cool. This guy's cool. He's cool. Like his smile, his his speaking voice. You're kind of like everything is about whatever age that you're at. That older person, it could be a parent or it could be a teacher. It could be, a neighbor. It could be anyone. But like that older, cool person is something that I've always been attracted to. Mm-hmm. Like just cool old people are awesome, know, and Alvin Lucier just kind of like going, man, like, geez, I wish you were like a relative of mine, like, a grandfather I'd never had or could have or whatever. It's like, man, this guy's cool. Yeah. Like you're cooler than Santa Claus, like move over Santa Claus. Right. Alvin Lucier, you're better in my book.
Let's go to your second record, Daniel. Again, give me the name of it and a little bit about why it's important to you as well.
Well, these records are kind of going in chronological order as far as my age, my formative years. So Alvin Lucier was, when I was like a little kid. And the next record is De Kreutzen, their very first album, self-titled De Kreutzen. And De Kreutzen was this hardcore band from Milwaukee that had several albums, but really the first album, self-titled, is the one. And the thing about De Kreutzen is, again, in 1985, I think it came out in 85. I could be corrected, but in 85, I would have been 15 years old, and hardcore punk was the deal back then in my world. It was hardcore punk, extreme metal, whatever, just noisy and extreme. I just jumped on it, and that was it. And the thing was, I was a skater too. I was really into skateboarding. I was obsessive skateboarding, And so skateboarding, the physical act of skateboarding is so physical and intense that you gotta have music to go with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was a kid that just always had a Sony Walkman with those dumb headphones with the little foam things, right?
Uh-huh.
And just blasting hardcore or whatever obnoxious, metal punk. And that's just all in my little young teenage world. That's all that existed was extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And skateboarding was all about extreme. But I have to digress a bit about skateboarding. You have to understand that skateboarding in the early 80s, mid 80s was really dumb and stupid. We didn't really do tricks. Okay. We didn't do, there was no such thing as ollie flips. It was like, why would you want to juggle on your skateboard? Skateboarding was very dumb and stupid. We were perfectly happy to skateboard straight into a brick wall and call that fun. We would just grind curbs and just roll off of ledges. No, I mean, the amount of tricks was actually considered like uncool. It was sort of like, what do you mean tricks? You just go fast and destroy things. That was just kind of the thing. So skateboarding and punk metal was like peanut butter and jelly for the sandwich of teenage hormones that I had. And but there's a problem. And the problem was with the hardcore punk and all that, it was really stupid macho, stupid asshole guys, asshole men, asshole boys. You go to these hardcore shows, everyone's getting beaten up. White power skinheads are showing up in mobs and just beating up anyone like myself that looked, weird and different. It was extremely violent. The shows, concerts here in Portland, it just was really awful. I know the word toxic kind of gets thrown around a lot, but this was really fucking toxic. Right?
Yeah.
I loved the energy of hardcore, punk, metal, and all that, but the whole culture behind it didn't fit me because I was just a scrawny, skinny kid who was actually really wimpy and I just couldn't hurt a fly. I didn't want to hurt anything. I just didn't have that in me. I just wanted to skateboard and destroy a curb. That was like as far as I went for, any acts of violence. I just want to take it out on a curb, And I was a really extreme skateboarder, meaning I skateboarded all day and all night and then go to a hardcore punk show and, slam dance and stage dive and then crawl into my bedroom window so my parents wouldn't know what I was doing and wake up so sore and, I had a nickname when I was a skateboarder. My nickname was Scabby because I was covered in scabs. I wasn't a good skater, but I skated really hard and extreme, but I fell all the time. So I was covered with sores and scabs. Not sores. I mean, sores is something you get from a disease.
Right.
But but scabs from the asphalt ripping my skin and flesh and all that. So I was just covered in scabs all the time. So all my friends would call me Scabby. This is kind of painting the picture of the physical and the music involved at the time in 1985. So when you go in the record store and you got all these punk hardcore records, you flip them through, you're just like, you're looking at these album covers, you're like going, well, I'm sure the music's great, but they look like assholes. I'm sure the music's great, but those guys look like assholes. And they all look like guys that want to beat me up. Uh-huh. And I kind of, this is sort of becoming a bummer of this whole punk hardcore thing. I used to be really, I'm very tall, but, I used to be really skinny with long hair. And, I just had these white power skinhead guys would target me. Like they would call me, homosexual slurs that you can only imagine. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then, they would beat me up and kick me and surround me and kick me with their boots and try to, it was awful. It sucked. It was awful.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're just sort of, you got a lesson that, toxic masculinity is fucking real.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't want anything to do with that. I just want to be a nice boy. I want to be a nice kid. I don't want to be an asshole.
Right.
And hardcore punk is starting to really smell like a bunch of horrible boys and men. I don't want anything to do with that. Anyway, so here's this record that I pulled out of a record bin at a record store, punk store. It was De Kreutzen, and the artwork is bright yellow, and it has this artwork of dinosaur bones on it. It's very strange and arty. I was like, wow, that's cool. And you flip it on the back, you see a photo of the band. They're really skinny, scrawny, young teenage boys with their instruments. And I go, I kind of look like them.
Right.
I think I haven't heard this record yet, but I kind of look like them, and they look like me. I think I'm going to like this record. I'm going to buy it. And, oh my goodness, right when I put it on, it was the absolute soundtrack to my physical state of who I was at that time. When I say physical state, I mean the intensity of skateboarding, the intensity of slamming on the concrete over and over again, and happily doing that on a daily basis. The sound of the skateboard wheels and the skateboard trucks grinding and skidding, screeching was matched the music of De Kreutzen, and again, when I skateboard, I always had headphones on, but also there came to a point where I was the only one who, of the old skaters in my town, I knew how to drive. I had a car. So you pack the car with all your buddies to go skateboard, and you go to a skate spot, which is basically be like, I don't know, a little curb and something to kind of go up and down on, nothing fancy. And you open up the car doors and you crank the stereo in the car, and you got to make sure you park so the car doors open up so that the sound blasts towards where you're skating. and you put in the De Kreutzen cassette, because at the time it was all cassettes. That's all I bought was cassettes, because they're, you can't play a record while you're in a Walkman, right? So
right.
So I was all about cassettes. Cassettes were also great because it was easier to hide from my parents, because my parents were really like, what are you listening to, And they just, so it was good to kind of keep all this forbidden music hidden from my parents. And so cassettes, I used to take out the artwork of the cassettes, the J cards, and turn them around or put in something blank to hide so that, mom and dad don't know that I'm listening to Corrosion of Conformity, or something like that.
Nice.
But then De Kreutzen was like this fantastic abstract thing where, like, first off, I might not even be saying this band right, like De Kreutzen, and we all were like, hey, aren't they called Die Cruisin'? Because, dude, you're cruising on your skateboard and you might die. Die cruising. Like, this is literally the conversation that myself and my buddies all had. Like, dude, this band, they're called Die Cruising. Because we're on our skateboards and we might die cruising. And then they're like, I think it might be German. It's like, are these guys from Germany? It's like, no, I think they're from Milwaukee. And you're like, where's Milwaukee? This is like the thing of dumb teenage boys have conversations about. You're like, what? But man, the music, oh my God. That first album, De Kreutzen, is a classic. And the thing that's so fantastic about it is every single instrument on that album is mixed perfectly equal. So the bass guitar is absolutely up front. The bass guitar is up front. When any band that pushes the bass guitar up front is a win for me. Again, I was a fan of Yes, so Chris Squire and that bass guitar pushed up. Did you know that Chris Squire said how his bass guitar got pushed up is because the headphones in the 70s, when Yes was recording, the headphones in the 70s could not do bass response very well. And so Chris Squire was like, hey, I can't hear myself. I need to push it up a little bit. And then you push it up a little bit. And you push it up a little bit. And because the studio headphones were so terrible back then, they're all very high end. Even Pete Townsend credits his hearing loss to studio headphones because they would just turn it up so loud. But headphones didn't deal with bass.
Right.
So Chris Squire would kind of, convince the rest of the band, like, you really need to turn up my bass guitar. Anyway, we're not talking about Yes, we're talking about DeKreutzen. Anyway, so in that first DeKreutzen album, the bass guitar on it is fucking awesome, right? It's really awesome. The drums, guitar, but man, the vocals. Okay, so the vocals on that DeKreutzen record is so screechy, awesome. So it is a perfect sound to what I was feeling when I was 15, 16 years old. And also, you're skateboarding, you're pushing your body to the max, you're slamming on the concrete, you're just bleeding, you're on the edge of breaking your bones, and you have the whole world you're angry at. And DeKreutzen was just like absolutely the kerosene to the fire, but it was really good. It was really good music. And I remember reading a zine, like I don't know what it was, but it was some sort of zine around that time, and Steve Albini was interviewed, and he was talking about how much he really hated the whole hardcore movement, hardcore music, for the same reasons that I did. But then he talked about DeKreutzen because they were on Touch and Go, and Touch and Go was the label that released Big Black and all that. And so Steve Albini was just praising DeKreutzen that, hey, this is a band. Yes, they're hardcore. I was just about ready to give up on hardcore. This is Steve Albini talking. But they shine a light that's like no one else can touch, And they were a bunch of teenagers, DeKreutzen. Now, I didn't see this at the time, but now you can watch it on YouTube. But DeKreutzen is on a cable access show. And I don't know what year, like 84, 85 or something like that. And they're so fucking awesome. They're just these young, skinny kids, and they're playing their hearts out. And this cable access show, and believe me, I wish I saw it at the time, but that's not how that worked. And they're interviewed, and they're really articulate and really nerdy, but you really just go, man, these guys are me and I am them. Like, they're raging about the same things that I hate, which is basically asshole men, asshole boys, bullies, just bullies, horrible, mean people in your world. And, DeKreutzen was the soundtrack as a weapon against these horrible people in your teenage young self life. And of course I saw these this cable access video only a few years ago, but again, there was definitely a bloodline of scrawny, wimpy, skinny, dorky, awkward young boys who have no idea how to navigate through this real world, because this real world is so awful and mean. But we found our way, and music, skateboarding was the only way at that time. Right. And the other thing about DeKreutzen that was really magical was the fact that they're from Milwaukee, which is a town that I didn't really know much about, other than it was like, oh, that's the city where DeKreutzen's from. I'm sure Milwaukee is famous for other things, but for me, it might as well just be DeKreutzen town, And I actually visited Milwaukee. I performed in Milwaukee in 2008 or so. So when I was there, I was just like, oh, man, I'm in DeKreutzen City. This is great. But I was like going, wow, this city is, Milwaukee is Milwaukee. It's like a lot of American towns. And you kind of get a gist of what made a lot of the extreme hardcore punk music so exciting and refreshing from the Midwest, from small towns. And I believe it has a lot to do with the eternal power of boredom. Mm-hmm. That boredom, when you're in an environment, you're young, boredom is such a gigantic force of negativity. And unfortunately, boredom makes most people really mean to each other. Mm. But if you can find a way to combat it, it's some incredible art and energy can come from that fight against boredom. And so it just starts to make sense, especially when you're dealing with the Midwest, with the winters. I mean, it gets really cold, and But I kind of sense it too. Here in Oregon where I live, I mean, it's actually really beautiful here. But people complain that it rains a lot and such. But boredom is a really great motivator to just do or die. When I say do or die, meaning do something amazing and awesome, or you're going to die of boredom.
Right. Right.
I was in Oslo, Norway, many years ago, and I was walking around. I was like, wow, this is a very interesting town. It's very small, but this is. I thought Oslo might be a little bit more of a metropolis, but it's a really small, cute little town. And the sound artist, Lasse Marag.
Yep.
Yeah, he's been living there all his life, and he's around my age, a little bit younger actually. And he said a really interesting quote that I thought rang true. Was he said in response to black metal, and I'm not really a big black metal fan per se. It's not something I really It's something you just kind of snicker at, but it's not, it's not my, it's not something I go, dude, black metal rules. My criticism of the hardcore punk can also translate over to the whole black metal. It's like, wow, it is a music genre filled with assholes.
Right.
It's like there's a lot of assholes involved with that stuff.
Yeah, totally.
But Lasse Marag said something rather interesting and profound. He goes, the thing about black metal that people don't understand is that if you really get down to the heart of Norwegian black metal, all it was a war against boredom. And that's all it was. And it's just as simple as that. It was a war against boredom. And for me, I thought that was a really great thing that he said, because I'm like, that translates very well to my side of the world, my side of my existence. It's just like the war against boredom. If you could do it right, if you can fight the good war against boredom, really beautiful things can come out of that if you do it just right. But you have to be as cool and beautiful and friendly and loving as possible while you're battling that war against boredom. But it's also pretty easy to go into a very negative zone, especially if you're an awful macho male.
Right.
And I mean, there's something kind of interesting about, following those two genres. And so with De Kreutzen, that whole album it means so much to me as far as it's just the perfect soundtrack for my existence when I was 15, 16 years old. And the feeling that my body, my memory of my body as it's flying in the air on my skateboard, and De Kreutzen's blasting out, and I'm about ready to hit the concrete, and I do hit the concrete, but it's not a graceful hit. I do hit the concrete. I don't land it. I fall, and my body is just scraping, grinding against the asphalt, and flesh and bones are just ripping and bending, and I get back up and I do it again, over and over and over again. And to me, it's like the best years of my life was destroying my body physically with skateboarding and listening to De Kreutzen. And I also do understand about the whole destroying your body thing. Like, I've never done a drug in my life. I really don't like the whole drinking thing. Just never really was into getting drunk or anything. But I still had a physical nihilism streak in me that is, it's common. And, with a lot of young boys. Digression, I work at as a librarian at a middle school, so I work with a lot of these, teenage kids, all types. And when I say all types, full diversity, and which is really beautiful. And so I kind of have my finger on the pulse of what it means to be young and dumb, but just filled with a lot of passion and but not really knowing at the time how to really channel it, but you're starting to figure it out. So even at my age right now, I still like to work with, young people all the time, just how to kind of channel their energy in this very confusing. And boy, let me tell you, man, what kids have to go through now compared to what we all had to go through then. I mean, it's a whole different world, and
right.
Challenges like, but I worry about the fine art of dealing with boredom with a lot of young people, because distraction is not really quite the solution. So there's a lot of distraction goes on. You're on your phone and you're kind of distracted by the bullshit of culture and everything. When really it's like, don't get distracted by that. Follow your blood, follow your heart, follow your bloodstream. Like, follow that bloodstream, folks. Don't follow the live stream or the internet stream. Follow your bloodstream. It's going to take you somewhere really awesome. The other streams are not. This is me talking to a 15-year-old or whatever. So, De Kreutzen, that first album is just so great, and the vocals, man, just it's unbelievably incredible screech. So here's the other thing about De Kreutzen is 1986, their second album came out. Second album, October File. Again, pretty cool album. Very strange, awesome. Not going to be my favorite, but it's a strange, awesome album. They were definitely getting away from the hardcore. And that's all right. That's fine. But they finally went on tour. Okay. And so they came to Portland. But at the time, Portland was always a little bit behind on what's really was happening outside the world. So it was like, oh, De Kreutzen's playing, but they're playing with a whole bunch of really awful macho hardcore bands.
Right.
And that's a bummer. And it's going to be a really violent show. There's going to be a whole bunch of white power skinheads that are trying to beat up everyone. It's going to be a bummer. It's going to be awful. It's going to be violent. But, I have to go. Because at the time, if there was a punk show, hardcore show, it was almost like a obligation. It's like, well, you have to go,
right.
even though it's going to be really dangerous and really violent. And believe me, the violence was off the charts. Anyway, so big, huge hardcore show. De Kreutzen's playing, but there's an opener, and the opener no one heard of. Okay, and this opener was called Boy Dirt Car, which was the members of De Kreutzen and a few other people. And Boy Dirt Car was the first band that went on. Again, I was 16 years old. All I knew in this world was extreme punk, extreme metal, blah, blah, blah. Boy Dirt Car was a noise, a full noise. I'm not going to say industrial, but they had metal on stage that they were banging, but they had several guys on electronics, and it was a absolute total wall of noise.
Wow.
Screeching feedback. They had two vocalists on microphones that were chanting over and over again, "He clawed out his eyes," like over and over again, to this wall of noise. sheer distortion, feedback, went on for 45 minutes, banging on metal. And I was absolutely mesmerized. And I was so blown away. Again, I was 16 years old. This band was Boy Dirt Car. No one heard of it. I turned around, like I was right at the stage. I turned around, I look over, and all the punks, all the hardcore, all the assholes, skinheads, everyone had their middle fingers up. They all were just shaking their heads, and it was hundreds of assholes just middle fingers up. And I go, wow, there's a band that everyone here hates, but this is really fucking blowing my mind. This is amazing. And this is not punk. It's not metal. It's more extreme than anything. It's just going on forever in this relentless like pounding. And then when I turned around, I see all the people that I actually hate, which is big, huge bunch of guys that want to beat me up with their middle fingers up at this band. I go, wait a minute. I think I just found a new best friend. And it's Boy Dirt Car. And again, this is, way before the internet. So like when stuff like this kind of hit you into your life, you're like, what the fuck is this? Right. This is so weird.
Yeah.
And there's no research, there's no nothing, And I was absolutely blown away by this Boy Dirt Car. And De Kreutzen played, and, and they were great, but they were kind of moving on to a different, a little bit less hardcore. And I even noticed like a lot of punks and horrible people were, flipping, giving them hell too. And then finally, the big hardcore bands played. Dr. No, I think, was one that played, and a few other ones. But it was just awful after that. All the violence went crazy. Anyway, so the next few days, I was at a record store, and lo and behold, there's a Boy Dirt Car record. And I was like, my God, there it is. And this album is called Winter. And I really recommend checking out this album. Very strange record. Again, from Milwaukee, from members of De Kreutzen and then other people. There's a fellow man in Boy Dirt Car, Eric Lundy. And Eric Lundy had several albums that he released under his name. And I became very obsessed by his work. All noise, all very abstract, all very strange. And so De Kreutzen was this amazing, beautiful gateway into this gigantic, incredible world of noise music, of noise, everything. Totally changed my life. And it also made me go, hey, bye-bye hardcore punk and all you assholes. I'm going over to this whole new world of extreme noise, extreme abstract music, really. And to me, to this day, I am very profoundly religious to the world of the abstract. And I kind of hope that my music comes across as a hymn, as a religious song to the abstract, If it has to be, the more abstract, the better. The more abstract, the more pure, more beauty, more just the world of abstract just was it. Like, I'm not going back, And even at the time, I had a little bit of some problems with like the whole industrial thing because I'm just not really that big a fan of anything that's just called an industrial. I go, well, it's not abstract enough.
Right.
It just doesn't have the abstract, But when some of the early Merzbow records started to come out, you're looking at the artwork, and of course you hear the music. You're like, this is really fucking abstract. And you're like, I'm sold,
right.
But I know it sounds pure blasphemy, especially saying this to a English person, but like, I just never got the whole throbbing gristle thing. Like, I just didn't get it. It's just not my thing. I don't. Actually, only recently I discovered the Kristen Cozy stuff, and I really like that a lot. But the throbbing gristle stuff, I'm only saying what I don't like to connect with what I do like, which is the abstract. But I kind of had this problem with the jumping into the industrial stuff because it just wasn't abstract enough. It wasn't, as I kind of say, it doesn't give you that WTF thing, like what the fuck is this?
Right.
What the fuck is this? And the bigger the what the fuck? Oh my fuck! What the fuck is this? Oh my god! I'm in love.
Right.
But when there's a bunch of symbols, a bunch of people posing with their facial expressions, looking like, this is, again, back to the punk and the metal, it's just, and the posing, I just started just not liking the posing, the facial expressions of like, this is how we represent our music by making angry faces,
Yeah.
Not saying that, I mean, who knows, maybe I'm guilty of that too. I don't know, but I try not to be. But Border Car totally changed my world. But it's really from the entry point of De Kreutzen. And I cannot overemphasize how beautiful all that was for a young teenage boy like myself. It was just like, you got me. You shot the poison dart into my neck, right. and you got me. Like, I'm yours. And it was, and it only like several years later, I reached out to Eric Lundy, who was the main guy doing the main noise in Boy Dirt Car, and just kind of say, hey, I know you don't know this, and I know this probably doesn't mean anything, but I was 16 years old when I saw you perform, and I was right at the front stage, and I kind of just I wrote him a fan mail like, kind of just want to let you know you changed someone's life, one lonely evening in 1986, like you really changed my life. Thank you. But my favorite song on the De Kreutzen album is All White, which was a complicated song because I was like, I remember being a kid and all of our skippers goes, hey, what's up with this band? They're German, but they have a song called All White. I think we might have a problem here. Yeah. I was like, no, just check out the lyrics. Check out the lyrics. I don't think it's like that. This is me talking in that teenage boy sort of way with my buddies. Like, man, I really fucking hope they're not a bunch of asshole Nazis. That'd be fucking suck, man. But, we're reading the lyrics. Like, well, the lyrics are rather abstract. And then the song All White is about being trapped in a room. It's all white. It's like a soft cell, like a padded white room. There's no windows, and it's just these long screeching vocal deliveries of what it feels like to be in a white room trapped. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel as a teenager, like that's it. That's the feeling, and you just want to escape. You just want to scream out of that room. That's it, man. That is the force, And so I really love that song All White. And to this day, even in my 50s now, I played that De Kreutzen record all the time. And whenever that song All White goes on, I just churn it up as loud as possible. And it still gives me that feeling of intense power to overcome, that white room of boredom. And I really, really, really thank all these beautiful people making this music when I was a kid to kind of give me that sword to, battle the beast of boredom.
Well, let's, in that case, go to your final important record, Daniel. So again, if you give me the name of it and a bit about why it's important to you as well.
The final record is Litanies of Satan by Diamanda Gallus. And again, as we began our conversation about the voice, and when I just recorded the story and everything, I've always held the human voice as the ultimate instrument. It's the ultimate. It's the voice is something that I'm in awe of. Whether you can use it in the most beautiful manner or the most destructive weapon. I'm rather obsessed with Nina Simone, so I just have like 30 albums of Nina Simone on my iPhone, and her voice just rips my guts out.
Right.
But Nina Simone's voice, again, that is something of such a force of nature. That said, though, experiencing the recording Litanies of Satan by Diamonic Alice was an absolute life changer. To begin with, I bought it on cassette. At first I remember I was kind of like turned off over the idea that it had Satan on, not because of Satan, because hey, Satan's cool and all that, but it was just this thing of like Satanism was always been really cheesy. It's just kind of like cheesy, especially back then. It was like, well, that's pretty cheesy,
right?
Like, that's kind of silly, right? Anything with Satan on it was like, well, that's kind of. I mean, take it. I like Slayer, like the next person, but you're sort of like, this is really silly when they talk about Satan. Okay, it's like, I mean, it's fun to yell Satan. It's like this, but when I saw this cassette of, this black artwork with this shining red head. Artwork's been different for the years, but the one I had on cassette, it was just this mysterious, blurry red head that it's her. You can tell it's a woman's face, but it's really blurred out. And then it was like her name, which was, for me as a young person, I can't remember when I bought that cassette, but I might have been like 18, I would say. So 18 is kind of a hell of an age to discover radical music. I mean, I think Lemmy from Motorhead said like everything that you hear when you're age 18 is going to blow your mind away, but that's because you're 18, not because the music was mind blowing.
Right. Yeah.
But I kind of thought that was kind of funny that Lemmy said that, because I was like, well, he's kind of right. Like whenever someone talks about the most profound music, it's like, you heard that when you were 18, right? You go, yeah, There's something about that 18, boy. It's just, the whole world opens up. Mm-hmm. So it had to been 1988 when I bought that cassette. And it was one of those things where, thankfully, the record store at the time, which actually was the record store that later released my first album, so there's kind of a connection there. They let me hear it first. And when I heard it, I was like, what the hell is, oh my, like, it's just was music. It was a voice, it was music, it was noise that did not come from planet Earth. Like, this is, when you first hear that Litanies of Satan by Demonic Alice, it's unlike anything. It still holds up now. Mm-hmm. Like, that is a weapon. It's an absolute weapon. And I kind of was like, okay, well, I'll bypass the Satan part of the title and buy it. But I still was very confused by the whole thing, because I was like, there's nothing satanic about this album or recording. I mean, it sounds like everything attacking you, but I'm not really seeing the Satan angle. And I read later an interview with Demonic Alice about the problems of trying to explain the title, and said, yeah, there was nothing satanic about it at all. It's had more to do with inspired by these early poems by, oh my goodness, I can't remember the poems, but it was kind of these prayers to Satan, but actually the whole thing had these allegories to to AIDS, which was what's going on in the 80s, and had a much bigger, greater scope of what it meant in her music. And so I was very blown away by this. I was very blown away that it had a much more expanded, angle to Demonic Alice's work, and it expanded even more and more and more as she went on with her records and her career. She is an absolute force of nature. Mm-hmm. When I say force of nature, she goes beyond human. It is that record, Listening to Satan, really changed me quite a lot as far as what it means when it comes to extreme music, or just extreme anything. But her approach of just making the most discomforting force of sound to really shake you up, and make you not only not think, but just feel in the most deepest of deepest levels. Of course I loved all her albums, but that first one really, really ripped me in half. Also, I hate to kind of pinpoint this, but in the 80s, it was just such a horrible decade. I mean, I don't have anything great to say about the 80s, to be honest. Right. But I have to emphasize, like, on my end of the table, my side of the tracks, I just had this world of horrible men in my life, horrible boys, horrible men, just the male awfulness of just everything. And I'm just like a dorky kid. So, of course, you're just seeing how horrible men are. And to hear Demonic Alice with this recording was like, oh my, I just want to be with you for now on. Right. Like, I want to jump on your boat. I want to be on your train. I want you to be the train driver. I want you to just drive me, get me away from everything horrible from this world. Like, Demonic Alice, you are the captain of the ship. You are just like, you, I mean, when again, I want to refer to her as a force of nature. She's beyond human, but just that intensity is absolutely incredible. Now, here's the deal. 1991 or 2, I have a hard time trying to remember exactly the year. She came to Seattle. Okay. Now, I was in Portland, Oregon. It's 3 hours away. And again, it was like before the internet. So like to find out that someone was performing in another city was kind of hard. And somehow I got word, holy fuck, Demonic Alice is coming to Seattle. And I figured out how to buy tickets. Got tickets like boom, boom, fast, boom. Drove all the way up there. She's playing in one of the largest venues in Seattle. It's the Paramount, which is gigantic. It's huge, beautiful place. That's where all the big bands play and everything. It's huge. But I was like, is she going to fill this place? I don't, is she really that big? Right. And she was kind of big at the time. And so, I'm driving all the way up there. I have like no money. I just spend like everything on this ticket. I spend everything on gas. I'm just like, on the edge of everything. But I'm like, fuck it, man. This is major deal. Demonic Alice is coming. This is it, And so I walk in the gigantic concert hall to find my seat, and I'm walking. And I go, oh, I'm front row. Not only am I front row, but I'm front row right in front of the PA, like on the one side. And I'm like front row in front of the PA. And I'm like, okay, well, let's go. And Demonic Alice, there was no opener or anything. So this is like this real deal. Like, this is an evening with Demonic Alice. This is it. And this is not a fucking concert. This is going to be a full-on experience, I don't want to use the word ritual or anything, but this is going to be not a concert. This is a witnessing a force of nature. Mm-hmm. And I'm front row. And I'm like 21, 22 years old. I don't know. And she comes out and she's covered in blood. Could be fake, I suppose. And she's naked. She's wearing a little skirt dress, but that's it. So she's wearing a little skirt dress, naked, topless, covered in blood, hair gigantic, 2 microphones, and she just goes off. Just goes off, full throttle, in all her Demonic Alice glory. And for incredibly long performance, that was full intensity, full on. And I cannot overemphasize how profound and how powerful that concert was to me. It was absolutely by far the most life-changing concert I've ever witnessed.
Wow. And
it really, in so many levels and layers, but to witness one person alone on a stage with only 2 microphones, and take it, she was doing some really wild effects, right? So she had someone kind of moving some effects around. But again, the minimalism of a performance of one person, and to be as powerful as possible with what you have, which is your voice. I was like, this wipes out everything in my past as far as what I thought was powerful. Like, she completely harnessed pure atomic energy of, 1,000 atomic bombs right there. And also, it's like, my goodness, she's, this is a naked woman covered in blood in front of me, just screaming her head off. I mean, I'm like going, this is really, more people should have something like this done to them. Like, this is, this is good. This is a very beautiful thing, folks. Like, I really recommend that you kind of, experience something like that.
Right.
It does good things to you. And I remember just after that, I was like, I don't know what it will take, but I want to perform, and I want to perform, now take it. I've been performing now for 30 years, and I perform all different types of things, all different types of styles, and all different, but for me, her performance, Demonic Alice's performance, was so profound that I was like, I'll never ever get to that level of what she is doing. We all fall short in the glory of Demonic Alice. Okay, we can say that. But at least I just want to, I really want to do that. I really want to be in a situation where I can perform alone on stage, just me and myself, with minimal amount of stuff, and project a force of sound that is so intense and powerful, but has a emotional intensity that really gets right through your cells and can kind of get right in there. And again, she raised the bar to the highest, but it's just one of those things, like, Demonic Alice kind of gave me that, that permission, that hey, you can do that too. You can put your heart out. You can just kind of really, really put your heart out and make it powerful and intense, and other people will receive it. Most people won't, but people can. And, it's possible. It's possible to create an emotion so intense that it just wipes out all thinking, all senses. Give it a go. That was the thing. It was like, give it a go. Do it. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to start performing. Thank you, Demonic Alice, for, passing me that flame. So it really meant a lot to me. Now, the interesting thing is, about a few years later after that concert, she came back to Seattle, and she was doing a piano performance in a small club, like a piano bar. And I was like, well, that's kind of strange, but that's cool. And I got my ticket, drove all the way up there, 3-hour drive back home, middle of the night. And she was doing all piano covers. And I remember like it was, it wasn't the same, and that's fine. It's fine. Like, she can't be doing her same thing for decades.
Right.
It's like she changes. She moves. That's the beautiful thing about what she does. I had a hard time trying to jump on board with that she was doing all covers, and I was just like, well, I do appreciate the covers that she's doing, but to be fair, she's doing Nina Simone covers. And I'm like, well, I'm not a big fan of what Demonic Alice was doing, but I never really listened to Nina Simone before, so I'm going to. So thank you, Demonic Alice, for turning me on to this. So there's a lot of people that kind of cover a lot of musicians, and then you go like, well, maybe I like it, maybe I don't, but I hear the original, and you hear the original, and that changes your life,
Mm-hmm.
So there's this whole thing of what made Demonic Alice. She was doing a lot of like Ella Fitzgerald and Billie Holiday, Johnny Cash covers. She was doing a lot of stuff. And I was like, okay, I wasn't won over by her covers, because really what I was won over was her unique expression of who she was with those early performances. Like, man, that's Demonic Alice. That's not a cover, a tribute. This is really a pure energy that she's projecting. That I really liked, and that's what I gravitate towards, of what I really, really find powerful. So, I mean, it's great what she does. Don't get me wrong, but when she's really being, herself as an original force of music, wow, that's powerful. But at the same time, though, I really got to thank her for her exposing me to all these other amazing musicians that no one else in my world was exposing me to. But hey, thank you, Demonic Alice, for turning me on to other music. So, huge admiration. At that concert when she was playing piano, I was there way early. Okay. And I was just being a dork, hanging out around the club all alone. And I'm like, I guess I got here too early. I'm a dork. And she walked right past me. Now, I know this doesn't really saying much, right? But she walked right past me. Now, I'm very tall. I'm very tall. I don't have British measurements, but I'm 6'3". But I'm pretty tall. And at the time, I was like tall and skinny. And this woman walks past me, and she's very much smaller. And I didn't recognize her, but it was her. But she was like, really tiny to me, to my size. But I was like, oh my God, that was Demonic Alice. She just walked right past me. But on stage, she looks like 24 feet tall. Okay. So that's the thing. This is what she does live, is that she transcends measurement. Okay. Like, when she's on stage, she looks like an absolute giant. Okay. And I was just like, oh, wow, that was really powerful. That was really remarkable. I was like, I mean, of course, she's a human being. We know this. But really, what she conveys is beyond human and beyond measurement, in my opinion. So, yeah, that's a biggie for me, a real biggie. And Litanies to Satan just got remastered.
Yes.
2020 remastered. It's I just purchased it on Bandcamp, and I'm going to play it after we're done here. But pretty remarkable that and anyone who's just like kind of, I mean, I remember when the whole black metal thing was happening, and I was like, oh, come on. Has anyone heard of Demonic Alice? Like, fucking hell, man. She'll eat all those stupid little boys up. I mean, come on, I mean, I was kind of saying that under my breath, like, when they go, dude, I really like black metal. I was like, dude, you don't know shit. Demonic Alice, man. Come on.
have one more question for you, Daniel, which is something I like to ask quite frequently, which is, if you really want to listen to a record, so you're going to go and listen to Litanies of Satan shortly, if you really want to soak up a record as much as you can, do you have a setup or an environment or something that you do in order to bring that experience out, to have that maximal listening experience?
Well, that's interesting to say that, because when I was young, fidelity was not a thing. You're just using this Sony Walkman with a cassette and terrible headphones. But you know what? Life was beautiful. You got the message. You got the force of music in these really crappy things. And it's funny, too, again, back to Alvin Lucier's Music for a Long Thin Wire. I played the CD recently because I bought it last year. I played it on my nice stereo in my nice living room and big subwoofer. I'm like, yeah, this is really nice. But I'm not feeling that nostalgia of being young and dumb and not knowing what good sound really is. But you just get what you have. But there's quite the charm in that. But I don't know what to say about that question. I mean, I do know what to say, but it's like this thing where it means a lot to have young ears and not knowing what is the standard of listening. You just listen. You just get what you can get, and you soak it in, and life is beautiful. And you have no idea that life could be even more beautiful. It's just like, this is really great for what it is at the time, at the place, at the time and the place. There's a lot of young people that I hang out with, and they'll make comments that they're not fans of this type of music, that type of music, when I'm kind of going, well, really? You don't like that band? But then I go, but wait, Daniel, it was a time and a place. Like, it was awesome for a 15-year-old in 1985. It's not awesome for a 25-year-old now. Like, it's like, no, you can't expect people, that are 25 years old to buy Atomizer, buy a Big Black, and go, dude, this is awesome. You're like, I don't know. You're like, actually, no, that's cool. You don't like it. You actually, you know what? You're young. What is the most awesome thing in your life? That is it. Hold on to it. Do not listen to old people talk about how great everything in the past was. Fuck them, okay? And, that's just how it is. You have to have an absolute respect for everyone's growing pains. And you have to have immense amount of empathy for what anyone is going through growing up. That said, you also have to have absolute respect for the music that they choose to deal with those growing pains. So you need to I encourage everyone to have as much empathy and respect for young people, because, man, what they're going through, that's a whole different game than what we were going through in our ages, or whatever ages it was. You gotta understand, like, when you look at the early American folk music, the Great Depression that went on here, and this incredible rich history of American folk music, and gospel music, blues, all that. You're like, that was the real deal back then. And that's the music that they used to deal with these incredibly hard times. And that was it. That was the firepower that was used. And that's incredibly beautiful. But, trying to convince, some kid, they're like, no, you should really listen to, Blind Willie Johnson. Seriously, Blind Willie Johnson rocks, man. You gotta really listen to Blind Willie Johnson, man. It's way better than Skrillex. Like, you can't be listening to that EDM shit. You gotta listen to some Blind Willie Johnson. You're like, well, no, just right. What you got is what you got. Music is it's a warm blanket fresh out of the dryer. It's also a weapon against, the bullshit of the world, the hardship of the world, the boredom of the world. It's the most powerful and beautiful force that a young person can get their hands on, so, no judgment, all empathy. But, I always kind of like, there's a lot of records, a lot of music that I really cherished and loved when I was young, but by all means, no one should be listening to that,
Right.
like no one, I don't, like, I mean, there's a lot of guilty, what's that called? The guilty pleasure records that I have. I'm like, oh man, I would not wish anyone to listen to this record, but I kind of love it, Anyway, so yeah, that's about it.
Yeah.
It's almost 2. Yeah.
Yes, it's been great, Daniel. Thank you so much for laying this all out, for digging into these records and into the soaring as well. This has been fantastic.
Yeah. And, again, it's just, what makes these records really important to me is that, I looked up to these artists as elders. They were just, take it, De Kreutzen was like my age, right? So I could relate to him. But Alvin Lucier, Demonic Alice, these are really, really, really fucking cool people that were older than me and spoke a language that guided me big time. And I really hope that everyone can kind of realize that there's a lot of people younger than themselves, and you could be powerful, role models too.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a parent by any means, but that's kind of part of the responsibility is just, if you're old, fucking hell, be cool as fuck to the young people, all right? Like, Jesus. Don't be a fucking asshole,
Right.
Like, nothing's worse than people that are older than you and just being mean and horrible. You're just like, God damn.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so yeah, music has always been about, beautiful people that are older and wiser than me. That's guiding me for life. And man, oh man, Demonic Alice, Alvin Lucier, boy, man, that'd make some. Yeah, I wish they were in my family. Have them over at Christmas time, Thanksgiving. Like, oh yeah, right on. But I do treat them like family. They're just like,
Yeah.
it means a lot to me. So anyway, that's all it is.
Well, Daniel, thank you once again, and to everyone listening, I'll see you next time. Goodbye.